the paradox has to be taken with all your heart. You have to really find the paradox powerful, even if it's insulting, and you have to go after it. But you should never lose the sense of paradox, lose the sense of loss, lose that aching sensation that you've only gotten this, that only this far did the screen show you, and the rest wasn't there, that you don't really know and really can never know, and that you have to continue to pursue, that your experience has to always be in a shadow. The shadow is good, and without some sense of the shadow, I don't think any version of light can be trusted. From outer space altogether and landed accidentally. There's such a randomness about the nature of downtown Los Angeles, where it is, why it's there. It has no natural geophysical boundaries. It's just present. It's present as if it were a glass matte painting. Until now, the population downtown is approximately what it was maybe 80 or 90 years ago. You have erasure on a scale that is so fantastical, and at the same time is observed in the corner of one's eye as you drive by one of 200,000 or 300,000 cars that pass on the freeway. So that this was simply going to be an extension of that first wave of high-rises. It was going to be called Center City West. It was going to continue downtown further. But of course, there was really no generative reason to add more high-rises in a sterilized environment. There was some attempt to make this more like a village, an urban village. But to make it an urban village, they had to first remove everything urban and village-like from it. And because there was this fantasy of Manhattanizing a section of downtown Los Angeles to make it a, quote, world-class city, you begin to see this massive, massive removal. And this is simply the last stage. This stage started in the 70s. The other stages started more or less planned in the 30s and 40s and executed in the 60s. All the buildings you're seeing were originally attached to a large hill that covered something like 500 acres. It was called Bunker Hill. And they removed the hill and kept the tunnels. This area used to, in a sense, sprawl upward or slope upward right into downtown. There is a complicated history to all these areas, and there are still people living in them, but all one sees is an empty lot. All one sees is, shall we say, the ashes left by an event that was simply burnt and spread on the water, in this case on the land. Where we are now is on Temple Street, about a half a mile from downtown at the northern edge of Temple Beaudry, and always having the signals of a problem when you see an oil well on a main business street. But it isn't really a main business street anymore. It's one of the oldest streets in Los Angeles. This is where the Temple block and the original downtown City Hall used to be. But what happened in the 1940s and 50s is the freeway, the Hollywood freeway, cut it off on a street that was then called California, and it's been stranded ever since. When they took out the hill in Bunker Hill, the slope that allowed you to walk into downtown disappeared. When they put the freeway overpasses, it made it terrifying to go in there unless you had a suicidal impulse. So there's really no way to go south or north on this street. And while there have been moments occasionally where some businesses have moved in and there is a kind of survival here, for the most part investors have come and gone. There were Filipino investors, Chinese investors. I think it's fair to say if a street in this general area west of downtown hasn't been leveled, it's not because they care, it's because they forgot. They forgot to take it down. It wasn't good for business. There wasn't any huge deal that they could cut in order to allow that street to make a profit, quick profit. or even a long-term investment profit. This isn't a, quote, profitable street yet. Bunker Hill was the highest point in downtown. You could see the ocean comfortably. It had a brow pointing toward the west. We're looking at it from the east. It had foothills, if you will, that allowed people to walk up and down, but it was much too steep for comfortable walking, so they put a funicular, a small trolley up there. It was one of the wealthiest districts in California. It had some of the grandest Victorian houses, and it was fortified, shall we say, by hotels that were fairly expensive hotels. Bunker Hill was right here. This is where it was.
Right where?
Where all those honeycombs of buildings are.
What do you mean, there's a hill there?
Yes, the crown of a hill, yes. The hill...
Where's the hill now?
In photographs. you can locate it in an archive, you know. It's in a drawer. The hill is in a drawer. You want, open up the drawer, you can take the hill out. It's very convenient, it's compact. It's smaller than a shoebox. Taking down the aesthetic center that would have given it life. And now, billions more have been spent or will be spent to try to remedy this problem. But once it's gone, you only have the trace memories. And then the people forget what they were for, and it just becomes a place that you drive past and you forget. You go through the tunnel and you get your ass out of here. So we start now. Actually, even before the freeways, I think that's LA. And a little glitter. And then that's Hollywood. In fact, associated with the beach. And then suburbs. They're not different. That includes the infamously busy 405. Well, Disneyland is here. Any sense of permanence. Each one has a different story. I'll just erase this now. Different historical pattern. That's Pasadena and so on. 1905, 1950s. It completely disappeared when they either started or ended. Palm trees have a lot of balls, from Woodland Hills all the way to Malibu, differentiated valley. I'll put Burbank, Glendale, and then that's gone. In fact, I'll go like this. I'll do this. Los Angeles is one of the strangest cities to live in when people visit. I don't know how many times I've been to a city, even in Europe, and people sit down and they talk about their month in Los Angeles as if they had been born there. I don't think anyone would do that about any other city but LA. I don't think anyone would talk to a Parisian urban specialist and lecture them as if the 1 month they were there taught them. So you wonder how that works. And it seems itself just a peculiar anecdote, but then you multiply that by tens of thousands of films and so many TV broadcasts and tourist imaginaries of one sort or another, and then you take the most photographed and least remembered city in the world, like Los Angeles, and of course people come right out of the airport as if they had grown up here, as if they had some gene that was already inserted permanently into their being. They don't quite understand how little they've ever seen. You go to a place that fictionally is there and is still fictionally not there. It's truly the ultimate imaginary. How many times have we seen the world blow up? How many versions of the end of the world have we seen? How many versions of the end of Los Angeles have we seen? I think LA is a very tricky city to understand as a tourist, frankly. I think overall people simply go to the tourist spaces that are either about cinema or about sunshine, and they don't know what else to do. They don't know how to catch the rhythm. They're not looking for what they haven't seen. They're looking to touch the place that is indelibly in their head already. They want to touch what they've seen. It's as if you can artificially replace a real experience with something that in the memory is just as visually powerful as if you were there. So in a way, in your mind, you were there, been there, done it. And so you lecture to other people, but it's so convincing, it's so powerful, it's so personal, it's so intimate, and it's so empty. You have a map, you have people's mental pictures of a place, then you have the facts of a place, and how they float into each other on a collective level is quite fascinating, quite remarkable, and it begins to feel more like a novel than like a scientific experiment. And yet, one can't resist the fascination of how memory theory for an individual still applies. The human condition can't be objectified as easily as we'd like. And it's getting harder and harder now that we have machines that could map for us even faster. And then you have maps of neighborhoods and demographic patterns and buildings that go down and where the freeways were built. And you lay one next to the other and you say, am I looking at some parallel process or not? Maps are a form of distraction in themselves. They're topology, they're construction, they're a kind of fiction that looks so solid that we have to stop ourselves for a moment and realize that this is just an invention of how things are. It's using facts in a certain way. And it happens simultaneously if it happens at all. It happens so that you don't see it. Downtown Los Angeles was being torn apart while the freeways were running. So that means hundreds of thousands of people were witnessing the erasure of downtown Los Angeles in a certain way, I guess. I mean, surely the traffic allowed you to see it a little bit if you drove every day, 200 days a year, let's say, back and forth. And yet, quite a few people, many people I spoke to, had no awareness that it had happened or was still even going on. It's quite fascinating. So you ask them, what do you think you saw? And they realize that they were, quote, distracted. I mean, distracted in a very literal, visual, and political sense. So then the tour buses come by, and then you see people gawking in tour buses. People sit down and they draw pictures of the house.
What do they come here for?
They come here because this is a piece of an Americana that they nostalgically imagine they want back. But the fact that it might still be present here, right this minute, is completely irrelevant. It's only, in a way, provided a layer of illusion, a Disneyland layer of illusion. And behind the Disneyland layer of illusion, behind with the tour buses coming in and seeing the fancy houses on Carroll Avenue, is a very, very complex and remarkable area that has, in a sense, no history at all. Carroll Avenue is continually invaded by tourists, coming by in their cars, coming by in their buses. What they see is a patch of Victorian Los Angeles, the only part of downtown that still survives. What people are imagining is some sort of false gentility, music carols and cookies and tea and rum cakes and people singing Christmas carols, wandering around in their cabriolets and their barouches, wearing top hats. This is where Michael Jackson's Thriller was shot, and various other corpses have fallen from the balcony here. A very useful place to murder someone, cinematically speaking. Beer commercials are shot here to show people in being slightly inebriated in a genteel way. Houses from other areas that are being destroyed either by freeways or by urban renewal, urban whatever that is, planning, are often brought here, or about 20 of them have. This is one from the 1870s, a classic mansion that was brought from Temple Beaudry. And as you can see, it didn't have to be torn down, it was restored. And it actually has pre-historicized the neighborhood. It's 15 years older than Angelino Heights itself. So now Angelino Heights has made itself older than it actually is, in addition to imagining what it actually wasn't. But it's really there.
Heritage Square was founded by the Cultural Heritage Foundation in 1969. We were founded solely for the purpose of preservation and restoration of buildings that would otherwise have been destroyed. The land comes to us on lease from the County Department of Parks and Recreations by the good graces of Mayor Sam Yorty.
Why were these houses moved here?
They were all moved here for preservation. They were all going to be destroyed.
Why this spot?
This spot because the land was available and we could get it for 99 years for $1 a year.
Yes, it was that.
Basically.
Now, the one thing you can't preserve, of course, are the neighborhoods
No.
that existed.
No.
So what's your feeling about those issues?
That's a mixed bag. That's a mixed bag. I think we live in a disposable society where we just, something's in the road, you just destroy it and you move it. We're attempting a history interpretation here. We are a museum, and what we are attempting to do here is to interpret what history was. And if we have to look at it and be embarrassed by it, well then that's the way it is. If there are racist things that come up, or there are prejudicial things that come up, that was a part of the history,
So
and it must be dealt with.
You mentioned that in the tour.
It must
because
be
it's
dealt
a realistic
with.
fact.
Right, it was a fact.
An architectural preserved building has no memory. It only exists inside its four walls. It only exists as the camera catches it. It only exists in the little carvings, in the little bits and pieces along the windows, in the ornateness, in the elegance. It doesn't speak to you because the muscle tissue has to be removed. It has to be removed, or else somehow it's too sad. It's too ironic. It's too lonely. And this can't be a lonely place. This is a place for happy nostalgia. This is a place where people take pride in the memory that actually isn't there anymore. When you deal with issues of erasure, it's hard to know if there's a distinction between purposefulness and simply electing to not remember. Selective memory is very hard to identify in terms of volition. I wanted to forget. You don't know whether you wanted to forget. Very often you just manage to forget. Oh, did I forget your existence? Oh, did you fall off the building? Oh, we were just filling up. We were just filling up the room. We didn't know. Oh, you mean you were supposed to be on the map? I didn't understand. You weren't in the room. You didn't raise your hand. Oh, that's right, you weren't invited. Oh, we forgot to invite you. Well, fuck you. You know. Oh, excuse me, I didn't mean, off the record. Never mind, we'll do it next time. That's how it goes, right? Well, I moved to Angelino Heights in 1979 in May, and it looked a little bit scary to me, but I really come from slum environments, more or less.
Where are you from?
I was born in Brownsville, Bedford-Stuyvesant, which is now in a very, very dangerous black neighborhood. It was just a declining area then. I think my parents had an instinct for what area was declining next, so we would get there first, so we could really watch the entropy, watch it sort of chill out to nothing. Then we moved to Coney Island when I was 5, just in time to watch Coney Island go from Irish gangs to Puerto Rican gangs. I remember the first Puerto Rican gang coming in, and how much tougher they were than anybody else. Then we moved above the butcher shop in an area that couldn't get too slummy because the mafia or whoever it was wouldn't allow the Catholics to sell their property to non-whites, something like that. And then as a college student, I lived in slummy neighborhoods also. Not slummy neighborhoods, they're just worn down remnants of one other thing or another. And I'm very comfortable in these areas. In the book, I mention a term that I use a lot of times in lectures to explain the social imaginary. A collective memory of an event or place that never occurred but is built anyway. I also call it a place you can find by its evacuation, by the trail that it leaves. What it means is that you have a collective memory that a group of people share. You don't know exactly what's in their head. You don't know exactly what picture they make. You don't know yourself what picture you make. But something will satisfy that when it's built. Something will look like the imaginary that people think they've shared together. It can be a political event. It could be a building. It can be a community, a neighborhood. It can be a film. It can be any number of objects. But what you really have is just what the evacuation leaves as a trace, as a memory physically. Disneyland's Main Street is a social imaginary. It's very ironic because a social imaginary is almost always about something that is misunderstood, but then when it's physically present, it's something you have to confront. It's a wall that's really there. Some people might say that religion itself is built on the social imaginary, on what salvation will or won't be. Therapy, science, bioengineering. History isn't anything but a social imaginary. History is, as Voltaire said, a bag of tricks. And I believe he said a bag of tricks that the dead play on the living, or he may have said the living play on the dead. I think it's a simultaneous experience. That history is simply a construction. It's a fiction that suits us. It's the evidence that's left. The physical remnant of an event can become a kind of social imaginary, but most of all, it's when you don't have any object but people's memory, and then you try to build something. We never saw Freud's unconscious, but maybe some patients have been cured by it. We've never seen whether the universe exploded, contracted, or whether it came out of a yeast infection that God had 3 billion years ago. We don't really know. We only know what the clinical facts deliver or what our imagination of a future or a past has for us. And that's often colored by strange events. I mean, it's very, very difficult to lasso it in and find what's outside of that. I think it's part of the human condition, but it's a part of the human condition that hasn't been examined as carefully and as honestly in many ways as other things. So the social imaginary is a warning about the paradox that the insubstantial can be very, very solid and very dangerous and very unreliable, but someone will build it. If there is a collective panic, someone will capitalize on it and build it. There's a lot of debate in LA studies and LA in general about the crisis of privatization and the loss of public space. The issue of what makes the situation particularly painful and confusing is that the classes no longer meet, so it allows for a kind of erasure and a kind of complicity between people and politics that's obviously dangerous. Then also, these spaces are gradually becoming kinds of public spaces where events happen, but you can't get involved in public political events there. You can't have rallies there. You can't do things in a shopping mall that you could have done in a public street. We're not replacing it with some other form of public discourse. There's some sort of a human connection that is going to be different. We're talking about an obsession with being out in the street in a pedestrian way, but mostly to shop, and an obsession with being in a kind of public space that is a simulation of what cities once were. And we have to look at this without nostalgia, without any phoniness, and just honestly say what's happening to public life, which is a very important part of our democratic process. I mean, it's very clear that within the next 20 years, almost no new public spaces will be built by any government anywhere that isn't fundamentally designed like an open-air shopping mall. One wonders if there's no place for these problems to be aired out, if there's no public life, what kind of experience, what kind of richness of life won't exist anymore? And if we don't miss it, what sort of American culture will exist? We're losing something. Maybe it's a trade-off people will be comfortable with. I'm trying not to get too melodramatic about it. I don't think that the world ever was that fair. But look what we're heading into. We're heading into a much more Victorian, more policed, much more surveilled world. And it's nice, it's comfortable, it's clean, it's cute on certain levels. It's all on cable. It's a level of distraction that's much more profound even than we had before. And I'm sure that it will generate political problems. Obviously, it's a much, much more rigid class structure. It will make it easier to control people's behavior and to circumvent constitutional rights on a local level. All of that's evident, but I don't know to what degree it will go, but it's clearly something that has to be watched, and it should be slowed down before it becomes ridiculous, where the only public spaces that are built with public monies are prisons. Schools are barely being built. Schools are a necessity. Where do children meet? Where do children socialize? Or do they just go home and ingest cable? I think we're developing a much stranger, much more neurotic vision of identity and public life. And eventually we're going to pay the price for it. Maybe the price won't be worse. It won't be worse than the Second World War, let's say. It's clearly a much more race and class controlled civilization that we're heading into.